Thank you for joining us here at ADL. For 45 years, ADL has been tracking anti-Semitic incidents to best understand what is happening and to provide data to the community to help address this problem. We've been closely monitoring and responding to the concerning rise in anti-Semitic incidents, particularly after Hamas's terrorist attack in Israel on October 7th, which was a watershed moment for the Jewish community worldwide. We have reviewed the final numbers from 2024, and it was alarming to see. 2024 was the worst year for anti-Semitic incidents since ADL first began recording. We saw an increase of 5% compared to 2023, which was also a record-setting year. This sustained elevation indicates the post-10/7 experience was no temporary spike. There has been a fundamental shift in the landscape. Anti-Semitism has become a persistent reality for the American Jewish community. This data confirms what Jewish communities have seen firsthand around the country, and it corresponds with a notable rise in anti-Semitic attitudes as well. Let's take a look at the numbers. There were 9,354 anti-Semitic incidents reported across the United States in 2024. That's an increase of 344% over the past 5 years, and an absurd 893% increase from 10 years ago. I mean, it's simply outstanding. And these experiences include Jewish congregants at a synagogue in Youngstown, Ohio, who received a bomb threat with a threatening message: "I planted powerful bombs in your synagogue. You don't have much time left. The bombs are hidden in backpacks." Just one of the 1,702 incidents targeting Jewish institutions nationwide included 627 bomb threats. Jewish diners at a kosher restaurant in Brooklyn, New York, were harassed by an individual saying, "You guys are killing babies, Jewish people are evil, and Hitler was onto something." Again, that's just one of the more than 100 Jewish-owned businesses that were targeted in 2024. And a Jewish student at the University of Pittsburgh who was assaulted by a group who said, "F the Jews," after they noticed he was wearing a Star of David necklace. That's just one of the 1,694 incidents on college campuses, representing an 84% increase from the previous year. Campus-related incidents comprised 1 in 5 of all reported cases nationwide, the highest we have ever documented. And also, for the first time in the history of the audit, a majority of all incidents, 58%, contained elements related to Israel or Zionism. Now, some may try to say that this isn't anti-Semitism, it's political activism. But if your idea of protesting Israeli government policies is to assault or harass or intimidate Jews, that doesn't make you a political activist. That makes you a bigot. Our mission is not just to catalog anti-Semitism, it is to stop the defamation of the Jewish people and to secure fair treatment to all. We are not backing down from that mission. ADL is spearheading efforts to pass the Countering Anti-Semitism Act, the most comprehensive effort to combat anti-Semitism in Congress. And we're advocating for the Anti-Semitism Awareness Act, which would help the Department of Education better identify and address anti-Semitism on college campuses by adopting the IRA working definition of anti-Semitism. We are also working to significantly expand the nonprofit security grant program, which provides critical funding for security enhancements to nonprofit organizations at high risk of terrorist attacks, including synagogues, JCCs, and schools. We at the ADL will not cede a single inch to these anti-Semites. We will not stop finding ways to prevent bigotry and to stop bigots in their tracks. And we will never relent in fighting for our community with everything that we have. Now we're going to dig a little deeper into the data. And I want to start by making a couple of other comments about the audit. It's more than just a snapshot of the anti-Semitic landscape. The audit serves as a barometer of sorts, a data-driven reflection of the challenges that we face and a guide for where we need to focus our efforts moving forward. Everything that we do at ADL, from research and advocacy to education and disruption, is grounded in data, not on assumptions, not on perceptions, but rather what is actually happening in our community. Some of you may be surprised by this data, 26 incidents a day, at least one per hour. But I would ask you, how surprised can you really be? If you have followed our research and our advocacy over the past year, or even just watched the news, you'd be familiar, for example, in the surge of anti-Semitic activity we've documented post-October 7th. You don't need to work at ADL to have seen this coming. And this increase is not merely a result of more robust reporting. This is a transformation in some ways of the American Jewish experience. The sustained nature of the growth in these anti-Semitic incidents is becoming normalized in American life. From social media platforms and influencers to our political discourse, anti-Semitic narratives are simply more common and accessible than ever before. Claims that Jews care more about themselves than the societies they live in is on the rise. And anti-Semitism hasn't just gone mainstream, but it has been emboldened and embedded in subcultures that fuel extremism and violence. Anti-Semitism is politicized, it's gamified, and it is normalized. And this data that we are releasing today shows the results. Now, just a couple more comments about what the audit is and what it is not. The audit is an effort to tally and quantify actual anti-Semitic incidents that real people experience, as reported to ADL by law enforcement, by victims, by media, by partner organizations. It's a measure of the experiences of being Jewish in America and how direct encounters with anti-Semitism impact the community. The audit is not a public opinion survey to measure anti-Semitic beliefs. It's not an attempt to analyze anti-Semitism online through big data analysis. Now, ADL does all of that as well, but they are not the purpose of the audit. It is also important to distinguish anti-Semitic incidents from hate crimes. A hate crime is a crime that is motivated by bias. However, many, if not most of the incidents in the audit are not crimes at all, let alone hate crimes. We are also careful to distinguish between legitimate political speech and anti-Semitism. For example, criticism of Israel or anti-Israel activism is not inherently anti-Semitic and is not included in our data. However, when anti-Israel expressions invoke anti-Semitic stereotypes or explicitly target Jews for their identity or perceived connection to the state of Israel, you can rest assured those incidents are included. Now, you can read our full methodology at adl.org. You can learn more about all the incidents on our heat map, on our website. We provide information on each one of these incidents because we believe in the transparency of our findings. Now, as you can see, we tracked an increase in 2 of the 3 major incident categories. Vandalism was up 20% and assault was up 21%. Harassment was up less than 1%, so roughly the same as last year. However, there were still over 6,500 incidents of harassment. So even though the percentage change is very small, the actual total is still historically high. And remember, each and every one of these incidents is not just a data point or a number. There are human beings behind each and every one of these incidents that have had to endure through these activities. Next slide. The slide shows just a few examples of harassment incidents people experienced in 2024. We define harassment as cases in which one or more Jewish people or people who are perceived to be Jewish were harassed verbally or in writing with anti-Semitic slurs, stereotypes, or conspiracy theories. Next slide. Vandalism, defined as cases where property was damaged in a manner that incorporated evidence of anti-Semitic intent or which had an anti-Semitic impact on a Jewish individual, also increased significantly in 2024. This category includes swastikas and anti-Semitic graffiti on synagogues, schools, Jewish community centers, and in public spaces. Now, notable vandalism trends include swastikas, which remain the most common anti-Semitic symbol used in these incidents, 37% of all vandalism incidents. And over half of the vandalism incidents, 51%, contained Israel-related messaging. And Jewish institutions faced a 39% increase in vandalism, with synagogues particularly targeted. Next slide, please. These are just a small sample of the vandalism incidents that we have tracked. And remember, it's not just property damage. These are messages of intimidation and exclusion targeting the Jewish community. And this may be a good moment to underscore again that 58% of all incidents had elements related to Israel and Zionism, the largest proportion in the history of the audit. For the first time ever, the majority of incidents in the audit that we recorded contained elements related to Israel and Zionism, from the glorification of terrorist organization violence against Israel and Jews to celebrations of the October 7th massacre. Now, let me be clear again. These numbers do not include criticism of Israel. We are not talking about disagreements with Israeli policies. Vandalizing a synagogue is not resistance. Targeting Jewish institutions because they are perceived somehow as an extension of Israel, that is not a protest. That is hate. And criticism of Israel isn't the problem that we are measuring in the audit. But when that criticism crosses the line into anti-Semitism, it is included. Next slide. Physical assaults, defined as cases where Jewish people, or again, people perceived to be Jewish, were targeted with physical violence, accompanied by evidence of anti-Semitic animus, saw a 21% increase in 2024. And of the 192 incidents of assault, there were 250 victims. Some were minor altercations, but in 23 of those cases, perpetrators used a deadly weapon, including knives and guns. And as we have seen in the past, Orthodox and visibly Jewish individuals were disproportionately targeted, accounting for 30% of all assault victims, despite representing a much smaller percentage of the American Jewish population. Now, these are the most extreme manifestations of anti-Semitism. Examples include a Jewish individual stabbed near a Chabad headquarters in Brooklyn by somebody who yelled "Free Palestine," and multiple assaults on Jewish students wearing religious symbols on college campuses. Okay, so that's some of the top line data. Now my colleague, Rachel Sass, ADL Senior Anti-Semitic Incident Specialist, who has spent the entire year going through this data, is now going to walk you through more of the details and give you a deeper dive. Over to you, Rachel.
Thank you, Oren. As Oren said, I'm going to dig a little bit deeper into our findings from the 2024 Audit of Anti-Semitic Incidents, starting with the centers of Jewish communal life in the United States, Jewish institutions. In 2024, incidents at Jewish institutions decreased, actually, by 14%. But this decrease was driven really exclusively by a decrease in harassment incidents, while vandalism and assaults increased significantly. vandalism by almost 40%, and assaults which more than doubled from 9 to 20 incidents. As in 2023, we recorded hundreds of anti-Semitic bomb threats against Jewish institutions, the vast majority of which targeted synagogues. These bomb threats often came in the form of large sprees of incidents. For example, in early January, over 100 synagogues were targeted over the course of just a couple of days. Moving on to perhaps the most significant finding of the 2024 Audit of Anti-Semitic Incidents, which was the extreme increase in incidents on college and university campuses. College and university incidents increased by 84% to 1,694 incidents. While college and university incidents historically in the audit comprised only a small percentage of all incidents, in 2024, they became epicenters of anti-Semitic activity. In 2024, almost a fifth of all anti-Semitic incidents took place on college campuses. Some of our most prestigious institutions of higher learning were the hardest hit by anti-Semitic incidents in 2024. The top 5 campuses for incidents that we recorded were Columbia University, Rutgers University, UCLA, the University of Michigan, and NYU. Unsurprisingly, this crisis of anti-Semitism on college campuses peaked in the spring, coinciding with the anti-Israel encampment movement. We recorded several incidents at and in the vicinity of encampments. For example, at DePaul University, people were told to go back to Poland and that they should leave America. Similar harassment occurred at and near college campuses across the country. At Yale, a Jewish student wearing a Star of David necklace was allegedly jabbed in the eye by an individual holding a Palestinian flag. Next slide has some examples of just a few of the anti-Semitic incidents that occurred on college campuses in 2024. You'll notice that all of these incidents are related to Israel or Zionism. Calls to destroy the state of Israel explicitly, calls to globalize the Intifada, which is often interpreted as a call for violence. The reason why these examples are Israel-related is because the vast majority of incidents on college campuses were Israel-related. I'll get a little bit more into this theme specifically of Israel-related incidents. But first, I want to move on to one more location type, which was incidents at K-12 schools. As with Jewish institutions, incidents at non-Jewish K-12 schools actually decreased in 2024. This is good news, but Jewish students and Jewish members of communities at non-Jewish schools continue to experience heightened levels of hate and anti-Semitism. The severity of these incidents ranged from harassment, intimidation, to physical violence. One student was called a dirty Jew and told that they should be put in a concentration camp. Another Jewish student was harassed by a classmate who said, "I'm going to beat you up, you effing Jew." That student was later hit in the head with a glass bottle by the student who had harassed them. Now I'm going to move on to a couple of top-line thematic trends that we tracked in 2024, starting, of course, with the theme of Israel and Zionism in anti-Semitic incidents. For the first time in the history of the audit, as Oren mentioned earlier, the majority, 58% of all anti-Semitic incidents were related to Israel. Now, I just want to reiterate one more time because this is very important. It is not anti-Semitic to criticize the Israeli government. It is not anti-Semitic to organize a protest criticizing the Israeli government. But increasingly, and especially in 2024, extreme actors in the anti-Israel space incorporated anti-Semitic rhetoric into their activism. And perpetrators across the political spectrum have voiced hatred of Israel in a wide range of incidents. That being said, one of the top drivers of Israel-related anti-Semitic incidents in 2024 were incidents related to anti-Israel rallies. Now, our team examined over 5,000 anti-Israel rallies, and we identified anti-Semitic elements in the form of signs, chants, and speeches, anti-Semitism in almost 2,600 of those anti-Israel rallies. Some of the most common themes that came up in this rhetoric related to anti-Israel rallies were the justification or glorification of anti-Semitic violence, including the October 7th, 2023 Hamas terrorist attack. There was support, explicit support for terrorist groups and leaders such as Hamas and Yahya Sinwar. There were classic anti-Semitic tropes such as the blood libel, the accusation in this case that Jews, Zionists, or Israelis thirst for the blood of Palestinian children. And of course, there was explicit anti-Zionism, calls to destroy Israel and to marginalize Jewish people for their connection to the Jewish state. On the next slide, there are some examples of Israel-related incidents that we tracked in 2024. You can see calls to kill all Zionists. This is not about criticizing the Israeli government. This is about attacking Jewish people for their connection to Israel, whether it be national, cultural, or religious. One of the most common calls we saw at anti-Israel rallies were calls to free Palestine from the river to the sea, which is largely interpreted as a call for the destruction of Israel. The normalization of these anti-Semitic themes demonstrates that this anti-Semitism has moved from the fringes of anti-Israel spaces into visible public settings, harassing the Jewish community. Moving on to one other theme that we tracked in 2024, which was white supremacist activity. Now, this is something that we've tracked for a long time. And while white supremacist activity in the form of propaganda decreased by 17% last year, it again, as with many of these other categories, remains historically high. There were 962 incidents of white supremacist propaganda in the form of flyers, in the form of stickers, and other messages in public, residential, and other spaces. Now, just 3 groups dominated the landscape of white supremacist propaganda. Patriot Front, the Goyim Defense League, and the White Lives Matter Network were responsible for 94% of this activity. As I mentioned earlier, the theme of Israel and Zionism has permeated even this type of anti-Semitic activity. In 75% of propaganda incidents, Israel or Zionism appeared as a theme. One of the most prominent examples is the propaganda distributed by the group Patriot Front. In almost all of the stickers and flyers that they distribute, they include the line, "No Zionists in government." White supremacists also organized dozens of anti-Semitic protests at public areas, on colleges and university campuses, and at Jewish institutions. I want to wrap up with just a few closing thoughts. 2024 was a difficult year for the American Jewish community, continuing troubling trends that emerged after October 7th, 2023. Jewish community feels that our pain is not being recognized. We want to send a message to members of the non-Jewish community. The Jewish community needs your help, needs your support. To members of the Jewish community, these numbers are frightening, but they do not define us. We will not let them define us. The friends who want to help us, our allies who are there for us, far outnumber those who harm us. We should be proud of our Jewish identity and of our thriving Jewish communities. We should be proud of our Jewish identity, including and that involves a connection to Israel. Through our strength and with the help of our allies, we will continue to be strong and to be proud and to be undaunted by this challenge of anti-Semitism. Thank you. I'm going to turn the floor back to Oren.
Thank you, Rachel. I'd now like to welcome the indefatigable Deb Leipzig, Vice President of Leadership, to lead us through some Q&A for the remaining portion of our time together.
All right. Thank you, Oren, and thank you, Rachel. We do this every year. I can't say it gets easier to hear these numbers, and it's just unbelievably frightening. I can't even imagine what it's like to live in your world on a day-to-day basis. But we have questions pouring in, so let's get started. All right. So for the first, people are asking, is this jump in numbers that we're seeing for 2024, is that a result of incidents being reported more? Or do we really believe that this is an increase in incidents? Warren?
Yeah, I'm happy to start. I think when people feel like they're in a time of crisis, and I think in many ways the Jewish community has felt like they've been in constant crisis, certainly since October 7th, sometimes the only thing that one feels that they can do is report an incident, right? That's the way that they can maybe have an impact when they may feel a little bit hopeless otherwise. But I don't think that increased reporting that we may have seen as a result of people wanting to engage, it can be the result of a nearly 900% increase over the past 10 years, right? Clearly there is something else going on. And even the numbers demonstrate with 58% of all these incidents having elements related to Zionism and Israel, that the post-October 7th environment in this country has let loose, a type of anti-Semitism in a way that we have not seen before. So I think there may be some additional reporting that occurs, but it does not account for the significant increase, not just this year, but especially when you take the kind of the 5 to 10 year look at this increase.
So taking another angle on that same topic, someone was wondering how many incidents are not reported or fall through the cracks, so to speak, incidents inadvertently not shared by law enforcement with ADL or not correctly categorized as anti-Semitic. What do you think?
I could take this one as well. I definitely think that, these numbers, as high as they are, in a sense, a tip of the iceberg. Not everybody is reporting, and it's not because, people are mistakenly not knowing how to. But I think in some ways, especially in K through 12 schools over the years, people may not feel empowered to do so. So I think underreporting, especially in K through 12 schools, is something that we have, commented on and observed for many years. So imagine what the actual numbers are. But I also think we need to remember that this is not accounting for every, expression of anti-Semitism that somebody comes across, right? All you have to do is go to the internet and you can see a massive amount, whether it's on social media or gaming platforms or whatever, amount of anti-Semitism. That's just not part of what we document in the audit. But in terms of people who are being targeted individually, whether online or on the ground, I think it's safe to say that this is probably still an undercount as well. But it is an important snapshot and one that we can compare and look at the data and make some decisions about what we're going to focus on moving forward.
Yeah, that makes sense. So this person notes that collecting data is admirable, but then asks, where is this data going to hold people accountable, and are we holding reported incidents as properly pursued and resolved with those responsible held accountable? This is where the work feels really necessary. What do you think about that?
Rachel, do you want to start?
Absolutely. Data on anti-Semitic incidents is just one piece of the work that we do here at ADL. It captures, as Oren said, a snapshot of where anti-Semitism is occurring. And we do a lot of other work to hold actors of anti-Semitism accountable. A lot of anti-Semitic incidents you might not hear about because some of my amazing colleagues here at COE have prevented those incidents from happening. We have a threat monitoring unit that keeps an eye on potential threats against Jewish institutions, other anti-Semitic threats, and often is able to alert authorities before they even occur. So that's just one piece of the work that we do to prevent anti-Semitism from happening. Oren, do you want to expand on some of the other work that we're doing?
Yeah, I'll just add, ADL is engaging in a multi-pronged approach to fighting anti-Semitism, through advocacy, through education, through our various partnerships. At the state level, ADL is calling on governors to launch a comprehensive state-specific strategies to combat anti-Semitism. Federally, ADL is advocating for the passage of the Countering Anti-Semitism Act. And additionally, ADL is focusing on youth education, working with law enforcement agencies to prevent these incidents from happening. All of this is built upon knowing what the problem is, right? We know that data drives policy. Data drives also the ability to convince people that there is a problem. So having this information, it's not just about counting it, releasing it on the audit and saying, good night, everybody. It's about what are we doing for the remaining 364 days, and how does this information and this data inform all of the approaches that we are taking to combat anti-Semitism. Today is a recognition that we need to start with a baseline understanding of what anti-Semitism looks like on the ground, what it feels like, where is it happening, what are some of the motivating factors, and then we get to work for the rest of the year to try to find ways to push back against that. And those are just some of the ways.
Sounds daunting to me, Oren, I must say. All right. So, Rachel, this one's for you. Did the phrase Free Palestine by itself count as an anti-Semitic incident in the audit?
That phrase in particular, we do not consider to be anti-Semitic on its own. Now, of course, the context of where and how this appears is central. For example, somebody spray painting Free Palestine on a synagogue is undeniably anti-Semitic. That is using a political phrase to target a Jewish community in their religious place of worship. A sign that says Free Palestine at a protest in a public area is a completely different story. And that, as many other phrases of calls for a support to the Palestinian people, and even criticism of Israel, even very harsh criticism of Israel, does not necessarily cross the line into anti-Semitism.
Got it. Thank you. Okay, we have a question from the UK. The anti-Semites we monitor are organized, disguised either as pro-Palestinian activists or as actual Nazi groups. Is this the same in the US? Oren, maybe that's to you.
So we certainly have our fair share of organized anti-Semitic movements and even groups in this country. But I will say that in many cases, the majority of incidents are not, affiliated with any one particular group or movement. These are in many cases also unsolved. When somebody, vandalizes a Jewish institution, not all of those people are caught or identified. So we don't actually know who may be behind that unless they leave some sort of, indicator in the graffiti that they're leaving, that they're part of some sort of group, et cetera. I think one of the sad things about many of the incidents that we count, especially when you look at K through 12 schools, but also in the public more largely, is that these are average Janes and Joes, right? Like, we don't necessarily connect all of this to organized extremist movements. This is about the normalization of anti-Semitism, across various mainstream and, some subcultures that most of us exist in and take part of in some way. And people feeling comfortable to act out on that. You don't have to be a card-carrying member of an extremist movement or a group to engage in the anti-Semitic incidents that we're documenting. In fact, in more cases than not, People are not affiliated with an actual group.
Got it. Thank you for that. All right, next question. Oh, this is a great one. Really interesting. So in the audit, we talk about a variety of physical harassment incidents. If nothing is done, there's no deterrent. Has law enforcement been supportive or helpful? What do they actually do to perpetrators of this physical harassment? I can go to either of you.
I can just start. This isn't necessarily in terms of going after perpetrators of anti-Semitic assault incidents, but I will say that many law enforcement agencies are pivotal to our work putting together the Audit of Anti-Semitic Incidents. Law enforcement agencies across the country provide us with data on anti-Semitic incidents, both criminal and not criminal in nature, that occur in their jurisdictions. And this gives us an even more accurate picture of anti-Semitism around the country.
All right, thank you for that. Okay, next question. What does ADL do to prevent bomb threats and swatting incidents? Oh, interesting. Oren, to you?
Sure. Listen, I think part of this is working with communities ahead of time to make sure that they're aware that, these bomb threats and swatting incidents are happening, right? To be prepared and not surprised when somebody calls in a bomb threat, or in the case of swatting, for those in the audience who may not be familiar, it's when somebody calls in to law enforcement or a suicide hotline and says they are inside a particular institution and they're going to either kill themselves or other people, and therefore law enforcement has to send a SWAT team. It's a fake threat, but it's real to those who have to experience it when law enforcement comes in. We track not only the instances of these cases by getting reports from the community itself, but on occasion, we are also trying to proactively prevent them from occurring. And I'm just noting that I'm getting some feedback, so I just want to note that to the folks on the call. There's an example from 2 summers ago where the Jewish community in particular is being targeted by swatting attacks. There were, dozens upon dozens of institutions in which law enforcement would show up because somebody would call in one of these fake bomb threats. It was something that we were tracking closely to the point where we were literally inside of, I'll say, a social media platform, seeing how this group online was selecting their targets to SWAT. And, many people will remember during the pandemic when a lot of people couldn't get out, a lot of services, not only in the Jewish community, but elsewhere, started being streamed online so people can engage with their community without fearing, having to leave their home at that time. So the streaming of services remains a kind of constant throughout various religious communities. And what these trolls did, right, these anti-Semites, is that they would identify synagogues based on which ones were live streaming their services. And they would call the police, or call in one of these fake bomb threats to 911 or to a suicide hotline. And law enforcement would show up, often running into the synagogue, sometimes even onto the bima. Now, why that's relevant is that these were being live streamed. So those that were calling in their fake bomb threats could literally watch as the law enforcement was responding and create a level of propaganda or content for them to then share with others. We were tracking it so closely for a period of time, we were actually warning both law enforcement and specific synagogues when they were being targeted, because we were inside those spaces in which these anti-Semites essentially were organizing their campaign. And we would call them ahead of time to prevent the fact that law enforcement would be visible to those who were watching on a live stream. And when they were no longer visible, meaning those calling in the fake threats did not visibly see the fruits of their harassing labor, if you will, they stopped doing it. But in addition to that, all the information that we collected on those who were doing these examples, we shared with law enforcement. And we have learned that 5 of the people responsible for the spate of swatting that summer have been arrested. And so that's one way in which we protect the community, is not just prepare them ahead of time before they are going to be swatted or get a bomb threat, but literally track down the people who are doing it and make sure that they are held accountable.
Wow, Oren, that's really powerful. Thank you for sharing that. All right, I have another one for you, Oren. You know, you're so popular is really what we're saying here. All right, so ADL said in the report that we do not conflate criticism of Israel with anti-Semitism, but President Trump appears to be doing just that with his claim that the protests on college campuses were anti-Semitic and his threats to punish pro-Palestinian international students. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot there, and I'm glad I'm so popular for that particular question. No, but listen, I think a couple of things can be true at the same time based on what was proposed in that question. We have documented a significant amount of anti-Semitism on college campuses. A good portion of that related to, Israel and in this sort of post-October 7th world, right? 1 in 5 of the anti-Semitic incidents in 2024, approximately 1 in 5, were based on college campuses. We saw an 84% increase in anti-Semitic incidents on college campuses this year, in 24, in comparison to the previous year. So there is, and there has been, and it's been well documented by us and others throughout the year at the levels of anti-Semitism that we have seen on college campuses. That does not mean that everybody who joins a protest or some activity, whether it's on campus or off, is engaging in anti-Semitism. In fact, we're very, very careful that when we talk about protests, we talk about expressions of anti-Semitism that we identify at these protests. Meaning we're not calling the whole protest anti-Semitic. There are some people there who may not agree with some of the more outlandish, crazy, confusing, or even anti-Semitic comments that are made at those protests. But we do count the expressions there. And in fact, of the 5,000 or so protests that we looked at more broadly that are generally described as anti-Israel, not all of them are included in our audit because we could not find expressions of anti-Semitism at those particular events. So we are very, very careful of not conflating the two, but that doesn't mean that we haven't actually seen an increase in anti-Semitism on campus. So I hope that sort of explains that sort of difference between what we're counting and what some people maybe perceived as what we're counting. Regarding the Trump administration, I just want to say that, we have, written about it. Our CEO has been on record that, this administration has taken a number of bold and important steps in the fight against anti-Semitism on college campuses. Many in the Jewish community were asking for steps to be taken, and some of those have been done. We've also, though, been very clear, including our CEO, that, we need to make sure that the efforts by the administration make sure that they account for people's civil rights, that due process is carried out. And more importantly, right, that we are not conflating the fight against anti-Semitism and diluting it by adding a whole bunch of other things that may not be related to that issue. So as long as we focus on combating anti-Semitism, I think, some important steps have been taken.
That was well said, Oren. Thank you. Rachel, I'm concerned you feel left out, so I have one for you. All right. Is the expression from the river to the sea looked at like Free Palestine, or is calling directly for the destruction of Israel different?
Calling for the destruction of Israel is, in fact, different. The call from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, is referring to from the Jordan River to the Mediterranean Sea, meaning that the entire state of what is now Israel and the Palestinian territories would be turned completely into Palestine, calling implicitly for the destruction of Israel. This is interpreted by many in the Jewish community as anti-Semitic because it is denying any existence of a Jewish state. So that phrase we do consider to be anti-Semitic when it appears in settings like at a protest on a college campus.
All right. I appreciate the clarification. Thank you. All right, folks, we're about at the end of our time here. And Oren, Rachel, before we leave, I'm going to ask both of you, is there any positive news? Who wants to go first?
I can start off.
Take it, Rachel.
As I mentioned before, I want to stress again that the support for the Jewish community is stronger than the hatred against us. I think on a more like kind of practical numbers level, which is what we do in the audit, the state of anti-Semitism today in April of 2025 is better than it was in October, November, and December of 2023, immediately in the aftermath of October 7th. So yes, we are living in a brightening time of heightened anti-Semitism. And at the same time, I believe that we can move past this, that we can fight it, and that things will get better.
All right. Thank you for that. All right, Oren, to you.
Yeah, I like that very much, Rachel. And I will just say this, you know, and I kind of alluded to this in some of the introductory remarks. You know, the year doesn't end, the chapter of anti-Semitism doesn't end with the audit. It's actually the beginning, right? And what we are providing is insights into the real world experiences of the Jewish community. And now we have an opportunity to figure out ways to be creative of how we push back. You know, identify partners who want to engage with us in that work, you know, find different creative initiatives, influencers, messaging, work with others in institutions, both within and outside the Jewish community, to actually push back on what we have. So to me, while the numbers are, you know, a bit troubling, they actually represent a call to the Jewish community and to our allies to say, here now, you have your work cut out for you. And when you have an opportunity to work on combating anti-Semitism, hate, and extremism every single day, I mean, to me, that's something that I think everybody on this call clearly cares about. And now the fun part starts, the pushing back, the disrupting, and making sure that people are accountable. I enjoy that fight, and I think many on this call do as well.
Oren, I think you're right. And I thank both of you for your insights and sharing this incredible work with us. Thank you for doing so. Unfortunately, we are about out of time. Oh, Jonathan, I see you've joined us. Are you able to say hello?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I just got off set here at CNN down at Hudson Yards in New York. I really want to appreciate Deb for kind of emceeing Oren and Rachel for doing what seemed to be an excellent job presenting the data. And I really want to acknowledge everyone who's on the line today. As Oren said at the top, like, we've simply never seen numbers like this. The idea that we've shattered yet another record, that anti-Semitism has reached an epidemic level, is terrifying. And the notion that in order to address this issue on campuses where it surged, as Oren said, or in other environments, we have to think differently. We need innovative steps. The government has a role to play, but a measured role that makes sense to address the actual root causes, not just to, you know, signal around the symptoms. At the end of the day, what I'll build on to close is what Oren just said. Like he and Rachel, you, Deb, and me, all of us at ADL are more committed to this fight than ever. We will not relent. We will not step back. We will be unapologetic in our mission of stopping the defamation of the Jewish people and securing just, fair treatment to all. We will be unambiguous about our core purpose, which is to protect the Jewish people. And we will not stop until we can finally turn around the scourge of anti-Semitism once and for all.
Thank you for that, Jonathan. Very important words for us to close on. But before we do go, I want to let folks know there are some things that ADL and that we would love for you to be doing. 2024 was another difficult year for the Jews in the United States, as it was said earlier. And that's why we need help from everyone in speaking out against anti-Semitism and hate. If you want to do something to address the worrying state of anti-Semitism in the US, we need our state leaders to act now. Join ADL in urging your governor to protect Jewish Americans' rights to live, work, and worship without fear. You can do this through the link that's going to be in the chat. You can also send a text message to take action. Text ACT, A-C-T, to 26769 and click the link to contact your governor and urge them to fight anti-Semitism in your state. From earlier in the briefing, I want it to be very clear, we do not just track and monitor anti-Semitism. We are on the ground. We are responding to incidents of anti-Semitism wherever and whenever they occur, supporting targets of hate and working with our partners to keep our communities safe. And we need you to join us. This research would not be possible without people in the community reporting incidents of anti-Semitism they've experienced to ADL. If you or someone you know experiences anti-Semitism, please report this incident at adl.org/report. Someone in one of our 25 regional offices can help you navigate your experience. You can also visit adl.org at any time for more details on the audit, on this call to action, or to visit our regularly updated heat map and many, many more fantastic resources. For folks in the media, if your questions were not answered during this briefing, please feel free to email them to adlmedia@adl.org. And of course, thank you to our wonderful speakers and for all of you for taking time to be with us here today and to help fight this fight. Have a wonderful afternoon.